Imagine a machine that could test your entire body with just one drop of blood. No big needles, no long lab waits, just a tiny prick on your finger. Now imagine this invention could detect hundreds of diseases: cancer, diabetes, heart problems. It would change medicine forever. And in 2014, one startup claimed they had built it. Investors believed it. Silicon Valley believed it. The media called it the future of healthcare. At its peak, the company was worth $9 billion. But there was one small problem. The technology barely worked, and the entire company was built on a lie. This is the story of how Theranos fooled Silicon Valley and became one of the biggest startup frauds in history. And to understand how something like this could happen, you need to understand one thing about Silicon Valley. It's a place built on belief. The belief that the next student in a garage might build the next billion-dollar company. Companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, all started with bold ideas. And investors are always searching for the next revolution. Sometimes that belief leads to incredible innovation, but sometimes it leads to dangerous optimism. And Theranos became the perfect example of that. Our story starts in 2003. A 19-year-old college student named Elizabeth Holmes had an idea. She believed blood testing was outdated. Normally, when doctors test your blood, they take big vials. Then those samples go to labs. The machines are huge, the process is slow, and the results can take days. Elizabeth wanted to change that. Her dream was simple. What if a machine could run hundreds of tests from just one drop of blood? It sounded revolutionary. Elizabeth Holmes was studying chemical engineering at Stanford University, but she was already obsessed with startups. Her professors described her as extremely driven. Some even said she reminded them of a young Steve Jobs. So she dropped out of Stanford University and started a company. She called it Theranos. The name came from two words, therapy and diagnosis. The mission sounded noble: make blood testing faster, cheaper, easier. And investors loved the story. But raising money in Silicon Valley usually requires proof, working prototypes, scientific data, clinical trials. Theranos had almost none of that. Instead, the company relied on secrecy. Employees were divided into small teams that rarely spoke to each other. Many engineers inside the company didn't even know what other teams were building. This level of secrecy was extremely unusual, even for Silicon Valley. Soon, big money started flowing in. Millions, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, investors valued the company at $9 billion. At its peak, Elizabeth Holmes herself was worth about $4.5 billion. For a brief moment, she became the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. Magazines put her on their covers. She appeared at major conferences, and powerful politicians invited her to speak about innovation. To the outside world, Theranos looked unstoppable. But there was a secret. No one outside the company actually knew if the technology worked. Theranos claimed it had built a small machine, about the size of a toaster. They called it the Edison device. The Edison machine was supposed to be a miracle of engineering. Traditional blood analyzers are large, complex laboratory systems. They use carefully controlled conditions and significant amounts of blood. Shrinking all of that technology into a tiny box was an incredibly difficult challenge. Many scientists were skeptical. But Theranos refused to publish any scientific papers, and that made independent verification almost impossible. The idea was simple. You put one drop of blood inside, and the machine runs dozens of medical tests instantly. If true, it would revolutionize healthcare. But inside the company, things were very different. The machines kept failing. Tests were inaccurate. Sometimes the results were completely wrong. Some engineers later said the machines were so unreliable that they would constantly break down. Sometimes they produced results that were wildly inconsistent. Other times, they simply refused to run the tests at all. This created a huge problem, because inaccurate medical tests can be dangerous. A wrong result could cause a patient to believe they had a serious disease, or worse, miss a diagnosis entirely. Engineers struggled to fix the problems. But Theranos leadership kept making bigger promises. More tests, more partnerships, more announcements. Inside the company, the pressure was intense. Former employees later described a culture of fear. Workers who questioned the technology were sometimes removed from projects. Others were fired. The company guarded its secrets very aggressively. Then came the biggest deal yet. Theranos partnered with Walgreens. Suddenly, blood testing centers appeared inside pharmacies. Customers could walk in and test their blood instantly. This partnership made the company look even more legitimate. Walgreens is one of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States. Seeing Theranos clinics inside real pharmacies gave customers confidence. It felt official, it felt trustworthy. But behind the scenes, many of the tests were not run on Theranos machines at all. Instead, employees secretly used traditional lab machines, the same machines Theranos claimed to replace. In some cases, the company even diluted blood samples just to make them compatible with traditional testing machines. This practice created even more accuracy problems, and some doctors began noticing that the results from Theranos tests didn't always make sense. That was the first sign that something might be wrong, and the company kept growing. The board of directors included powerful figures like Henry Kissinger and George Shultz. These were influential leaders, but most of them had no medical background, and few people questioned the technology. This was one of the most unusual things about Theranos. The board included former diplomats, military leaders, and political figures, but almost none of them were experts in laboratory medicine. Normally, medical technology companies include scientists and researchers on their leadership teams. Theranos did not, and that lack of scientific oversight would become a major problem. Until one journalist started asking questions. In 2015, a reporter named John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal began investigating Theranos. Carreyrou began hearing rumors from former employees. Some claimed the technology didn't work. Others said the company was misleading investors. At first, these claims sounded unbelievable. After all, how could a company worth billions be built on something that didn't function? But the more he investigated, the more troubling the evidence became. At first, the company tried to stop him. Lawyers sent warnings. Executives denied everything. But former employees started speaking out. They revealed shocking details. The machines didn't work. Test results were unreliable, and the company knew it. The investigation exposed the truth. Theranos was not a medical breakthrough. It was a massive deception. The story exploded across the world. Suddenly, investors panicked, partners walked away, and regulators stepped in. Government agencies began their own investigations. Medical regulators inspected Theranos laboratories, and the results were alarming. They found serious violations in the testing procedures. Some labs were even temporarily banned from operating. The collapse had officially begun. Within months, Theranos collapsed. Its valuation fell from $9 billion to zero. Employees lost their jobs, investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars, and patients who had trusted the tests began questioning their medical results. What once looked like the future of medicine had become one of the biggest scandals in the history of Silicon Valley. Elizabeth Holmes was eventually charged with fraud. The startup that promised to revolutionize medicine had misled investors, doctors, and patients. Years later, Holmes would stand trial in federal court. Prosecutors argued that she knowingly misled investors about the technology. The case became one of the most watched startup trials in history because it raised a difficult question. Where is the line between bold entrepreneurship and outright fraud? The story of Theranos teaches a powerful lesson. In Silicon Valley, big ideas attract big money, but excitement can sometimes replace evidence. Investors wanted to believe in a miracle technology, and because of that, they stopped asking hard questions. A $9 billion company was built on promises, not proof. Innovation can change the world, but real innovation needs transparency, and science needs evidence. Because without those things, even the most exciting idea can turn into a disaster. Because sometimes, the most fascinating companies are the ones that failed the hardest.